Hey, welcome back to Flannel Farms. My name is Brian, and I'm glad you're here. It's been frozen here for about 9 to 10 days. We have had, I hate to say unseasonably cold weather, because typically about once a season we get a week of very, very cold temperatures. And that makes things tricky when you're homesteading. Pipes freeze, animals need shelter, equipment doesn't work. Our golf cart currently won't start because it doesn't have a strong enough battery. So we're going to talk about what temperatures your animals can sustain, and then what we do when some things go wrong, like, oh, I don't know, all of our water is frozen. Now, it is important to note that I am in coastal Virginia, so cold temperatures for us are below freezing, and earlier this week with wind chill temperatures, I felt like it was about 10 degrees. So I know some of you up in areas like Montana, Iowa, Alaska, it's a whole different ballgame. So you're going to have unique challenges that I don't face here. But for my mid-Atlantic folk, these are some ways you can survive these cold snaps. Let's start with chickens. Chickens are actually very cold hardy. They have an internal temperature of above 100 degrees, and they are surrounded by a beautiful downy blanket known as feathers. Their coop needs to be dry, and it needs to be moisture free if possible. You need to make sure there's plenty of draft that's coming through, because these chickens create moisture with all their breath and exhalation. So if it's too sealed up, you will actually cause harm, and you can cause some of those frostbite issues with moisture. This coop is open, as you can see on the sides, has a roof to keep rain off of them, but they are just fine in here at temperatures down to around 0 degrees. If it were to get colder, and chickens have survived negative 25 degrees for up to about 24 hours at a time, you would want a bit more on the sides, but you'd still want somewhere for moisture to escape. They don't really need heat or a heat source. If you do decide to use a heat source, heat lamps are not the best choice. A brooder heater is a better choice. But really, they just need good dry bedding, and they need access to unfrozen water, and they need a little bit more food, because producing all that heat burns up more energy. For the most part, as long as they're dry and there's a good ventilation draft, they'll be fine down to very, very cold temperatures. Temperatures you and I would find unpalatable. Cows can withstand something like negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit for brief periods of time. The problem is their water. Our water trough is a giant cast iron tub. And when their water freezes, I can heat the whole thing up using my propane torch. Now, if needed, we'll cart water back and forth from the house. That's a big pain in the neck. At some point, I'd like a heated water source for them. But with where we're at and how far from the house we are, it's currently prohibitively expensive. We've only ever had to do this a couple times, because typically here in coastal Virginia, you don't have it be cold so long that the hoses don't thaw and you can't get the fresh water. This is a super easy solution if you don't have solid cold temperatures all the time. Again, people in the great frozen north, this is probably not a viable solution. But for those of us in Tennessee, Georgia, the Carolinas, Virginia, probably parts of Pennsylvania, you know, somewhat temperate climates. The important part about cattle, when trying to keep them safe in these types of temperatures, is making sure that their coats stay dry. Shelter is a good idea when you get those cold rains and then you get the really cold temperatures afterwards. They're okay in snow, that seems to kind of fall off them a bit. If it gets really cold, they'll end up laying in their own manure to stay warm. When you have more than one cow, though, they can huddle together for warmth, and they tend to do that. Cows can also lose up to 3 pounds a day trying to stay warm, so it's important to make sure they have some sort of shelter to keep them dry and plenty of food to eat, because their own body heat is what keeps them warm, and that takes a lot of energy to do when temperatures drop. We'll let them get their drink. We'll melt the rest of the ice. And we'll talk about piggies. Piggies. Hello. So you can see we have little piglets. They're about 4 months old. Bigger piglets, 8 months old. Big mama here. Pigs are cold hardy down to something like -40 degrees. You want to make sure they have, again, some sort of shelter. So the little piglets you can see are in this area, and when I walked up here, all of them were in that little house, and their body heat keeps them warm. They have plenty of dry straw. The other pigs don't have any shelter to speak of. They're just out here roaming the wilderness. But if there's enough of them, they herd together and their body heat keeps them warm. They do have plenty of dry straw though, which is important. They use straw like blankets. But the trick with pigs also is you got to keep their water wet. So we're going to do the same thing we did with the weed torch over with the cows, and we're going to melt the water they have out here, let them get a good drink. Thankfully, it's supposed to thaw out a bit today, so we're hoping the hoses thaw, but if they don't, you can use that weed torch to thaw your hoses, and I'll show you how to do that next. So here we have frozen hose. You can hear it, that it's frozen. So what you can do is take your weed torch and actually gently go over it like this. Now you obviously don't want to do it in a field full of grass like I am, because all that grass is going to catch on fire. Stop catching on fire. But you could undo your hoses, wrap them up on your gravel, your driveway, something like that, and just gently use that weed torch. Don't torch it in one place for too long, but the ice and water that are inside that hose will prevent it, for the most part, from burning. If you leave it on full blast in one place too long, the ice melts and the water runs away, you're just gonna set your hose on fire. Not optimal, but we're talking kind of emergency measures. Typically, we only have cold weather here in Virginia for 2 to 3 days at a stretch. So, though it doesn't get cold enough to freeze their water all the way through. As a matter of fact, our 55-gallon drum for the pigs is not frozen all the way through, so they're still able to use their nipple waterers. But if we did run into a pinch like we did this week, where they're starting to run out of water, and we're carting water, if we had no unthawed areas, then we could use the weed torch to do it, which we've done in the past. We did leave a hose near the house dripping, so that way we have access to at least fill up large buckets and bring them. So what are some of your cold weather solutions? I'm sure some of you out there who are watching this channel have dealt with worse temperatures than we have. We've been below freezing for about a week, and by tomorrow it's supposed to be 50, and I believe by this weekend up to 70. So we're not gonna have any issue refilling all their waters. But what have you done? What tips and tricks do you have? Maybe something that I haven't shown that would help me out. I'd appreciate it. We're still learning here at Flannel Farms. My name is Brian. I appreciate you joining me today. As always, keep growing as you grow. We'll see you next time. Bye.